Whoa. Hey, what are you doing in here? You gotta be sweating. Oh, ouch, for 3 days? Oh yeah, the HotBox. It's got a few issues, but let's go ahead and talk about it. So I bought this HotBox from WHAM BAM a few months ago, and I've been using it with my Elegoo Saturn II ever since. If you saw one of my recent videos linked in the top right, then you'll know that my experience with WHAM BAM so far has been great. Now with that said, I'm a little hesitant to recommend their resin HotBox. But before I get into that, tell me, what kind of printing do you do? Do you do FDM printing, resin printing, or did you just wake up to some weirdo talking about shit that you don't care about? Let me know down in the comments. The HotBox comes well packaged with a USB extender, some stickers, and some instructions. I also grabbed the optional LED resin bar that mounts on the inside corner of the HotBox, so I could see my prints while they're in progress. WHAM BAM claims that they created the resin HotBox to help get more consistent results and fewer failures by utilizing a temperature-controlled environment. The HotBox is constructed with fire-resistant nylon fabric with an internal heat-reflecting layer and can be folded up flat and stowed away easily. When set up, it is a 330mm wide square standing at 580mm tall, which just fits over my Saturn II. There's a hole on the bottom right of the front where the USB extension goes. The front flap has a UV-resistant window, letting you see your print's progress. On the back is an opening for cabling and a flap to install a venting solution. On top is a handle for lifting the HotBox along with a strip of Velcro for holding the front flap back. Now, I wish WHAM BAM would have used a magnet instead of Velcro here. They already used magnets around the front flap of the resin HotBox, and I'm confused why they didn't go ahead and use that instead of Velcro. I'm a little worried that the Velcro is going to wear out over time, and I really have no interest in having to replace that. On the front is a temperature gauge, which hosts my first issue with the product. It doesn't come with any batteries. Now, I know this is a small issue, but I find it so frustrating. I would much rather pay a few more dollars for the HotBox and have it come with the batteries I need than have to go out of my way to buy a 40 pack of batteries, 2 of which I'll ever use. Overall, the HotBox is very well made. When printing, the temperature inside of the enclosure slowly rises to about 26 Celsius from a baseline of about 21 Celsius and holds for the remainder of the print. The chemical reaction that occurs when UV light hits resin occurs most efficiently when the resin is between a temperature of 25 and 30 Celsius, and it seems that the HotBox maintains a temperature in that ideal range. So why am I hesitant to recommend the HotBox to others? Well, there's a few reasons. The first is that the HotBox is not big enough for my Elegoo Saturn II. When I originally bought the HotBox, they hadn't released their HotBox Mega for larger form factor printers yet. Regardless of that fact, I don't think that they should be recommending this HotBox for larger form factor printers. That tight fit has almost caused me to break the USB port on my Saturn II on multiple occasions. They should have just let us know that a larger version was coming in the future so that we could have waited and purchased that instead of spending money on one that we want to upgrade later on. Now, my biggest issue with the HotBox is how WHAM BAM have marketed it. It seems like the intended use is to ditch the cover of your printer and just use the HotBox with an active heating solution and some kind of ventilation. Since I'm not currently ventilating, every time a print finishes, I have to remove the HotBox and then remove the hood. It's inconvenient, but it's definitely manageable, but it means that I can't use the USB extender or the LED bar that I got with it because it's just too inconvenient to unplug, plug in, and mess with the wiring. Now, I don't ventilate due to the nature of my apartment windows, and that's actually one of the reasons I originally bought the HotBox. While the odor problem wasn't a huge deal with my Saturn II, I still went ahead and bought the HotBox, and since adding it, I never notice odor anymore. Still, it's not an ideal setup, and I definitely keep my air purifier running at 100% at all times, and if it's nice out, I prop the window open. I'll actually be designing an enclosure for my 2 resin printers to live in, and I will tackle that challenging ventilation issue. If you're interested in seeing how that enclosure ends up, then go ahead and subscribe so that you'll be able to see that video when it comes out in the future. Now let's say that you do have a proper ventilation setup. Even if you ditch the hood of your printer, with the HotBox for these larger printers, It still requires some maneuvering and some room to actually remove the build plate or the resin tank from the enclosure. Yeah, you could remove the hotbox after every print, but that would entail removing the USB extension, an LED bar if you have one, and your ventilation solution, and that's just more than I want to deal with every time a print finishes. And that's what makes me so curious about the way that Wham Bam decided to design their hotbox. Why'd they market it as lightweight, foldable, and portable? I mean, who in the world needs these things in an enclosure? I understand that making it lightweight and foldable is a good way to, take down costs, but I don't get the marketing that it is helping us in any way. Instead, I think it should have been designed to be thicker, more thermally insulating, and more airtight instead of lightweight and foldable. Those improvements would outweigh any improvement brought by making the hotbox more portable. As mentioned, Wham Bam claims that the temperature inside of the hotbox enclosure can be maintained by both the temperature released from the machine during printing and the heat released from the catalytic reaction of the resin curing. And after the last few months of using it, I found this a bit misleading. Turning the printer on and letting it sit inside of the hotbox for an hour while the machine runs didn't appear to affect the temperature in any way at all. Now, I'm sure that the machine produces a reasonable amount of heat when it's actually printing, but there was no way for me to separate that heat and the heat released from the catalytic reaction, so I can't make any great comment on that. The hotbox does end up reaching 26 Celsius in that ideal range for resin printing, but that's the issue, is it reaches that temperature. It doesn't start at that temperature. Based on their claim, I purchased the hotbox without intending to ever get any sort of active heating solution because I print indoors at room temperature. But one weekend, I couldn't get a single print to succeed, even though I'd been printing the same file for weeks without a single failure. I re-leveled the build plate, I changed the FEP sheet, nothing fixed it. After trolling Reddit for a while, I eventually found some pictures of people's failed prints that matched the issues I was having, where the supports weren't attaching or curing onto the actual initial burn-in layers of the print. Turns out, my resin was too cold, but what the heck? I have a hotbox that should be maintaining the temperature in that ideal range. It turns out I left my window open a little longer than I meant to on a cold day, and it dropped the temperature in my printing area about 2 degrees Celsius. At the time, I ended up fixing this by increasing the exposure rate of my printer from 2.5 seconds to 4 seconds. Now, after this whole temperature fiasco, I kind of started to put the pieces together, and I immediately went and bought a fermentation belt to wrap around my resin vat to help directly heat the resin. I'll be making a short video on this to discuss if it's a effective and convenient solution. But again, that's the issue I have with Wham Bam's marketing of the hotbox. They say you don't need an active heating solution, at least when you're not in a cold garage or something. Without an active heating solution, I don't think that the hotbox is going to bring any improvements to your prints. Since the hotbox uses passive heating, you're not going to reach that ideal range of temperature for resin curing until about 30 minutes to an hour in your print. By then, you've already passed that critical point where you need the supports to burn in onto those first burn-in layers. Another issue I have with the hotbox is what is being heated. The hotbox is actually heating the entire enclosure and everything in it. The issue with this is you only really want to be heating the resin. It's important that the resin has a higher temperature, not the entire enclosure. In fact, you don't want the print that has been completed and is no longer being submerged into the resin to be warm. You actually apply heat using either a heat gun or warm water to make support removal easier. And you don't want support removal to be easy while you're printing. That's more likely to lead to failures. So the ideal resin printing environment would be one where you can actively heat the resin to the ideal temperature range. You can keep the air in the chamber at about 20 Celsius room temperature, and you can easily maneuver the build plate and the resin vat in and out of the enclosure. One where you don't have to take the enclosure off and put it back on and move all the wiring and the ventilation. I do believe that the hotbox can help you reach those ideal printing conditions, but not alone. And that's why I plan to grab the Mega Hotbox when I have some extra cash to grab it. But if you don't want to add a heating element, you're not going to use ventilation, and you don't want to ditch the hood of your printer, then I don't recommend the hotbox for you. It's a fairly expensive product, and you could just grab a grow tent off of Amazon for much cheaper. But if you are planning on adding all of those things, I think the hotbox is great. I think it'll really help you create those ideal resin printing editions. So, despite not being able to recommend WHAM BAM's HotBox to everybody, I still think it's a great product and I still love WHAM BAM's company. Their customer service is excellent and every interaction I've had with them has been stellar. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to watch out for my next one where I install WHAM BAM's flexible build system for my resin printer, the Saturn II. I'm going to find out if it actually leads to fewer headaches or if it comes with its own set of issues that I'll have to solve. But for now, that's it from me. Leave a like if you found the video helpful, and if you want to return the help, leave a comment too. If you're interested in seeing what I'm working on next, go ahead and subscribe. I'm planning on continuing doing 3D printing videos and doing some smaller projects for the next year, but once I never have to turn in a homework assignment again, I will start working on larger products, and I'm so excited for that. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye.